Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Anthony Woodruff, and I'm here to share a dissertation research project that I completed. The title of it being Creating Visitor-Centered Museum Experiences for Adults with Developmental Disabilities, a collaborative case study. I recently completed my PhD at Florida State University, focusing on museum education and visitor-centered curation. This research took place in Paducah, Kentucky, which is a small to mid-sized town in McCracken County, which is that red county located in that map. A little bit about me as an artist and a visual arts educator. I've worked in schools for roughly about 10 years, from intermediate level to middle school to high school level. I've also been a part of many museums, being the Ringling Museum in Sarasota and the Florida History Museum in Tallahassee. As an artist, these are some of the things that I've really got into as of late, and that is social justice themed paintings. Many of these people you can recognize, but I do want to kind of spend a little bit more time on this one, with the state conference being in Texas and the controversy of certain things that we're all trying to overcome as teachers. I'm just taking a moment to tell you that I think reflection can happen through art, and a lot of these events that have happened recently, I've taken to art as a way to deal with emotions and reflect on what's happening in our society. Now, back into the research, the main question that is in my research is how museums are tackling social injustices and working with new audiences and seeking out new members of the community as a way to grow the museum. In this project, working with individuals with disabilities, taking them to a museum, they kind of came to the conclusion that understanding, accessibility, interactives, collaboration, communication, and evaluation are important when trying to create new opportunities for individuals with disabilities. The problem and the purpose of this research is there is a growing concern for equity, diversity, social justice, human rights issues that are a part of our daily life now. If you have noticed the little clip in the corner, the John Oliver clip that he did about museums, if you're really into museums like me, you've probably seen that. If not, it is a funny take on some of the issues that we are facing as museum educators. But with that, with John Oliver now doing a story, a lot of people now know museums need to change, but there has been a lot that museums have done to reach out to communities. But I will say, with that clip, a lot of people know that we can continue to get better as museum educators. Another purpose of this problem is I've got a passion for individuals with developmental disabilities. I started my career as a special education para-educator in a FMD, MMD classroom, which is functional mental disabilities or mild mental disabilities. And these include individuals with autism, individuals with Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, a lot of things stemming from developmental issues that just kind of affect either the body or the mind or both. These individuals are human. They are great. And I've learned a lot about being a better person from these individuals. And I thank them for not only how they helped me in this research, but how they've helped me in life. And another problem or purpose is this research was done at a small museum, but I think museums of all types, sizes, and budgets have the ability to reach new audiences, whether it be a small local art gallery, museum, art center where this research took place, all the way to university museums, where I've done some things with the Museum of Fine Arts at Florida State, mid-sized to large institutions like the Florida History Museums, the Ringling Museum in Sarasota, or even big institutions like the Tate Modern in London or the MoMA in New York. All of these have abilities to reach individuals with developmental disabilities. This was a qualitative research study, and within this study, it was a case study of 6 individuals and staff members from the museum and their parents. I'm sorry, 4 individuals, 3 staff members, and 4 sets of parents or caretakers. The case study included interviews with museum staff members and parents or caretakers, observations during the museum, discussions with the participants, who I refer to as artists in the dissertation, and art making, and seeing how their art related back to the museum. This was a convenient sample of artists. I had worked with them all previously during my time as art director of Easter Seals, which is an organization for adults with developmental disabilities. And it's very like a school environment, but teaching some social, functional, and occupational skills. The research took place at the Yiser Art Center in Paducah, Kentucky, and pictured there is the Yiser Art Center. It is an old kind of marketplace building in downtown Paducah that half of the building was converted into a small museum and art gallery, and the other half of the museum is actually a theater. This event, because you can kind of see the size of the museum, a long, narrow building that takes out a whole city block. We did this kind of at the tail end of COVID, where restrictions were started to be lifted. The best place for us to make art was outside. This building does not really have a classroom space that we could use. Sometimes they use their building itself and their gallery as a art making space, but for this exhibition that we saw, there wasn't that room. So we're kind of right outside the sidewalk right there. There is a strict speed limit, but being outside next to traffic and as people were walking by did create a barrier that we had to overcome. The theoretical framework behind this research, the main framework is disability studies, and acknowledging that these individuals, the story had to come from them. I don't really know their story, so a lot of it was trying to pull their information from them, and disability studies acknowledges that. Another framework that was used, transformative paradigm, which is acknowledging that power relationships do exist in research. And I tried to take out as much bias as I could, and I did learn a lot from really focusing on their thoughts. And I got a lot of inspiration from inclusive art making, and inclusive art making is a shared art making experience with individuals with developmental disabilities. They are kind of the idea generators, and I am the facilitator, or the other person is the facilitator, helping them create the art that they want to express. But ideas are exchanged, and we're really creating art together based on shared ideas. All of these things were vital in really knowing how these individuals experience and react in museums. This is a short video of the gallery setting that we experienced. I created museum research workshops where we met for 3 consecutive Saturdays in June. And these 3 consecutive Saturdays were at the same exhibition, which was Tell Me a Story exhibition, which was from a local Paducah artist. This artist, as you can see, had some interactive pieces. All of these vases, ceramic vases, not only were you allowed to touch them, and the small sticker said you can touch them, you can spin them, you had to spin them in order to kind of read and experience the stories. This exhibition also had a video display. There were large sculptures, there's giant banners, that there's several different types of art making and several different types of things individuals could interact with. After each museum research work, or after the gallery experience, which we scheduled about 30 minutes to walk around that gallery space. During that gallery space time, we also talked with a museum educator and asked her questions and kind of had a group discussion before we moved outside and made art. And when we moved outside and created art, I was leading a discussion about how they like to experience museums. And as they are talking, we're also making art. And this is, you can see underneath those two tents, 4 individuals. I'm kind of serving as the facilitator and distributing paint supplies. And I'm going to each individual and helping them in their art making as we talked about the museum and we talked about art. And findings from the second workshop, you can kind of see the development of their art the second time. Some of the things we talked about in the second time was more accessible bathrooms. This particular museum did not have a very great restroom for individuals to use. They had one, but it's not the most accessible restroom. So these individuals need updated restroom facilities. They did enjoy things to touch. They like to touch and interact with things in museum. And they really enjoyed spending time with friends and family when they're at the museum. If you can kind of see my 2 individuals at the corner of the table, and you can kind of see that picture with these cars driving by. This is after COVID restrictions has started been released. So some of these individuals were used to being friends and seeing each other kind of on a normal basis. And this museum research kind of brought them back together. And a lot of times they were talking about cars driving by because these 2 individuals have an interest in cars, and you kind of see them looking at each other and talking to each other as they're painting. So this research also brought people back together after COVID. In the third research workshop, we had the local artist that come and serve as our guest docent, and we also interviewed him that day or created a discussion with him about what he tried to do with his exhibition and what individuals with disabilities need. He also has experience with some of these same individuals, and you can see him describing ways to touch and interact with his pieces, talking about the large word pieces as we kind of moved around the space. And in the third research workshop, he talked about collaborative works is how he described it. And he wanted people to experience the art by participating in it. And that would provide more understanding between the viewer and the artist himself. And that reminded me of Supported Interpretation by Pat Villeneuve, and kind of that needed item to bridge the gap between art and people. There's got to be some kind of interaction that takes place to bring the art to the people and create understanding. They also talked about seating and comfort, ways to be seated within the gallery, but still be able to experience the art. Because we had some people that had some mobility issues. So even though our gallery space was small, they liked to sit and look at the art instead of walking around. Storytelling was important as well, and how these pieces told a story. And when you interacted with them, you could really interpret the story for yourself. After our thing, you can see the updated artworks from our third workshop, their finished works. And I will say, without the input of individuals, I myself would have interpreted these artworks very differently. The first one with the kind of planet in the middle, she came wanting to create the artwork that she wanted to. I initially thought art might be related to the museum, but it was only the case for one person. So I thought this shape was initially some of the geometric sculptures within the museum. The same thing with the triangles here. I thought these were related to the geometric sculptures. These circles here on his, I thought were related to the geometric sculptures. The yak here, the Yeiser Art Center uses a yak as their mascot, and there is a big red yak outside right where we were making art. After talking to them about what their art meant, only the yak was really related to the museum experience. ultimately everybody else came with their own idea of what they wanted to make and kind of had some pre-planning, knowing that they would get to come and make art, and they had made art with me before. So they were like, we're going to make the art that we want to make. So talking to these individuals was super important to get the true understanding of how they experienced the museum and how the museum related to art. Findings from the interviews include, and these were interviews with parents and the museum staff members, admission prices. Admission prices should be set at a low level, or if people with individuals need to pay an admission price, they should be able to leave the museum and then come back. Several parents mentioned admission prices as a barrier because sometimes there's a issue, whether it be behavioral, whether it be physical, whether it needs to be a bathroom change or something like that, that happens. And sometimes they have to leave to deal with what's happened, and they kind of feel like they wasted money. So admission prices are something to think about. Everybody liked accessibility hours. Accessibility hours being open a little bit earlier before the general public is allowed in. That allows time for the community to experience the museum together, for parents to share, for parents not to be judgmental, because this is the accessibility hour. They know each other, they know other individuals with disabilities. These parents and caretakers know what individuals with disabilities need. We visited the museum right when they first opened, so it was kind of us in the gallery at all times, but we did not have a private museum showing. I think only once during the research, another group came in, a small couple came in and kind of walked around, but that did not interfere with what we were doing. The social aspect and friendship of it. Parents really enjoyed this opportunity because it was right after COVID, and being able to have their children be able to socialize again, even though they were adult children. Individuals with disabilities still need that interaction with other people. Interactives, both parents, both individuals really wanted interactions to happen within the museum. They thought interactives led to more learning. Parents wanted an increased understanding from museum staff members of knowing a little bit more about people and knowing more about their needs, where sometimes they thought that they really don't know a lot about the needs of people with disabilities. As far as the museums and what their viewpoints were, they desire to do more. The Yiser Art Center wants to do more with the community, but they have a staff of 3. And that staff of 3 is limited. There's a lack of staffing. They don't have anybody that is fully over education or the community aspect. They all have to share roles. This might be easier at larger institutions. Interviews were kind of, you can see the word clouds above, and kind of key words were taken from that. One individual mentioned a lobster artwork several times. It was somebody's favorite piece. So you can see right there, somebody's impact of it was, I loved it. You need to go back and have a blast with that lobster, is what she told her caretaker. And they eventually came back to the museum after to kind of walk around one day. So results and conclusions, everything was kind of, data was all collected and then broken down. There was member checking at each section where I took my notes and kind of went over what I thought with everybody, and to double check and make sure it's really their voice, their opinion of what data I was collecting. So again, the main question: how can museums create inclusive and visitor-centered programs for adults with developmental disabilities? This is what we came out with, our main coding, and then our kind of sub coding under that, you can see. But I also think this can be expanded to multiple members in the community, not just individuals with developmental disabilities. So understanding, are things age appropriate? Are they connected to their own interest? Accessibility, mobility is something. We had somebody using a walker. Are aisles designed for people to get around in wheelchairs? Special visiting hours or accessibility hours, accessible restrooms, seating inside the gallery when people need to rest. Interactives, hands-on activities and art making was thought of as being the best thing to promote learning in a museum. Collaboration, you have to have compassion for individuals. You have to have a concern. There needs to be staffing in the museum to be able to handle the needs of the community. Communication, from communication supported interpretation. Is the artist ideas making it into the public's ideas? How is there a way that the museum can create opportunities to increase communication? Friendship was good. All these artists coming together and making these social bonds with each other. And then finally, evaluation in their member checking. How's the data you're collecting really capturing what people think? Some emergent findings, and this is the really good stuff, things that I didn't really know about. These artists go to museums. In initial pilot study and literature review research, it kind of said otherwise. But talking to this group, they go to museums. They go to museums often. They travel. They have both positive and negative experiences. They were more than welcome to share both. Other things, I went to one individual kept inviting me to his Special Olympics baseball game. And we went and we met other individuals from the disability community, which turned out to be a very large audience. And being a former art director working with individuals with disabilities, I thought I kind of knew everybody in the community, and that was not the case. In this Special Olympics baseball game, there was 100 people that I've never met or seen before. And then at the Special Olympics event, it was a small community of individuals with disabilities, but also individuals that really care and knew how to connect with this audience. And a lot of people came just like me because they were invited by this group. 17% of children have a developmental disability. If you correlate that data to adulthood, 17% of adults have developmental disabilities. And one reason I love individuals with disabilities is that number is not segregated into one type of race or culture. That includes all cultures, all races. So by connecting to this group, you're connecting to other groups as well. Finally, recommendations for future research. You've got to build trust with marginalized groups. I used a convenience sample. I'd worked with these individuals before. I knew them so well. It was very hard for me to give them code names in the research. You got to build trust. If you can't build trust, you're not going to get good feedback. And that trust might take a while. Include art making in museums as much as possible. I think similar research can happen at mid-size and larger museums. And I want to take this to a mid-size or larger museums to really test these themes. And those themes of understanding, accessibility, interactives, collaboration, communication, and evaluation. And then in closing, and this was a great quote that I took from the artist, and a great conclusion to the research, and being able to step back and really focus on the ideas of the people. And that is, sometimes we need to back away from the thing that we're concentrating on in order to see where it is in the world and how it makes sense to us. If it wasn't for getting the actual feedback from artists, I would have thought these art pieces were related to those geometric sculptures in that other picture, but they weren't. And we really need to get the feedback and get their individual feedback of how they experience a museum and how all audience experience a museum, instead of experts saying what people need. And that is all I have for you. Thank you for joining me. Have a lovely day.